Hello, El Paso, and welcome to Philosophic Dialogues from La Frontera. My name is Kim Diaz, and I'm a philosopher here at EPCC.
And my name is Jules Simon, and I'm a philosopher from UT El Paso.
And today we are very happy to have Lindsey R. Swindall, has a Ph.D. in African American Studies from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and currently teaches at Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey. She has written several books in the field of African American studies, and her writing has been published in academic and literary journals. We are also joined by Grant Cooper, who is an actor and stand-up comic who has performed in the New York City area since the late 80s. Cooper also works as an actor trainer in scenario-based training at charter schools in the New York City area. This work is done through Winfield Artists, L.L.C, the company he owns with Lindsey Swindall. We're really happy that you're here today because you're right at the frontera, you're right at the border of art and politics, art and democracy. From my sense is that you straddle both fields with the work that you all do. The work that we've been doing this last few months has been talking with people who are in the field of art and then also who work in politics or democracy. And so my firm ground here is Art as Experience from John Dewey. I want to say he wrote that in 1934. And basically the premise of that book is, well, there's many things there, but for me, one of the takeaways that I take away from it is art isn't, he introduced this theory where art is not what happens at the museum or when you hear the symphony so much, but art is what happens also when we go watch a baseball game, or in Jules's case, a basketball game, the Knicks, and or when the mechanic has been working on his car for a few days, right, and then finally the engine starts and he hears the engine, and so that's an aesthetic experience. And you also, your work, you take art and you bring it to the community. You bring it to school, you bring it to community centers. Why is it important to share art with, art being an exclusive activity for just an exclusive group of people?
Can we hold that question a second?
Yeah.
Can we just have the two of you explain what you do? I mean, what is Winfield Artists?
We don't know what we do.
Yeah.
We don't. No.
Yeah, just a little more. Give a picture. Give an aesthetic picture to our audience. Just tell. Do you go into schools? Do you go stand on corners and do your thing, or
So I'm a writer and a professor by training, and Grant is an actor and a comedian, stand-up comedian by training, but when we sort of came together, how this happened really organically was that we had a book event for my book, my biography of Paul Robeson, who is an artist who definitely brings the art to the people for the purpose of furthering social justice.
She never had a book signing. Then my brother said her last book was coming out on paperback, and then he said, "Hey, have you ever had a book signing?" And she said, "No," which is a crime. And so he decided to, because you're trying to give the professor's speech, I'm going to give the ground level speech, which is, so he's going to have a book signing in the backyard in Brooklyn and a book signing at the house in DC. But the great thing about it was, one, that she hadn't had a book signing, but we had but she's not a normal professor because she has an artistic brain. So she said, well, let's do a presentation. And then she had me read Paul Robeson's, some of his
some of his speeches, and we would do like reenactments of some of his interviews,
and that was horrible.
And
right.
We did reenactments of him being like called before the House Un-American Activities Committee and things like that to sort of enact moments from his life and talk about the history and how the art intersected with that. So that original program, we then took it to the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, and for 2 years we worked with them, and we traveled all over New Jersey going into mostly libraries, but also like public libraries, community centers, places like that. And then when Grant started working with some charter schools in New York City, we linked up with the charter schools, and so we started taking the Paul Robeson program into like middle schools and high schools. We've been to a few colleges as well. So really the idea is to expose them to, the history of who Paul Robeson was, but also those broader ideas of, art being in service of society, art being in service of the people, and those sorts of things.
You'll see who we are because you'll see how we talk. So the great thing is, I guess, of us having us explain that, because for a long time we didn't know when people would ask us what we do, because we didn't set out to have a company and do these things. As you know, Kim, I call her Doc. Doc was on her way, on her own journey, and I was on my own journey. But the way we started and where we are today actually is a good representation of what art is, which is art is something that just happens. You know what I mean? It's an organic thing. It's an organic creation of things, and then it just takes on a life from there.
Yeah, that's true.
Because we never had a plan. I've been in more schools now and in libraries and colleges than I ever did, because I went straight to the military. You know what I mean? The Navy at 17. So we are living, I think we're kind of living representations of how some art can really form, which is it formed out of the moment, the times, but the times before we met each other, you know what I mean? But the times once we did link together, and then it just kept, we keep reflecting what the times are and stuff like that. And that's what's the best part of what we do and where we are, is because everything has been organic. We never thought of these things. Although she's already wrote her books and I've done my stand-up, and the arts found me. So that's why we had a hard time explaining what we did, because we were just doing, you know what I mean, and doing. But we have a better definition once we decided to try to, make some money.
That's another story.
Yeah, because the thing about art, an artist, even, the way, Kim, the way you go about things, and Jules, from being what you do, is when you do it for art's sake, I hate to say, but when you're just doing what you do, we don't think about money. We don't think about those things, because we get so much joy and satisfaction from doing what we do, which is basically coming from our souls. But then you realize one, you can put a price on it, but also it's good to be able to support yourself in doing that as well, because then you can end up doing, you could take more chances, whereas, but that's a whole nother thing. How's that?
Yeah, it's more sustainable. You can keep doing it.
Real quick, the thing is that what we found out, though, is that we end up stretching ourselves a lot more than where we thought we would go. Because for me, as a stand-up, it's like try to get on a sitcom and then you be able to, and all these other things. But here I am in schools, doing scenario-based training, which I started with NYPD first. So it's the thing about art, like, I don't want to say real art because I don't act like I know, but art can take on a life of its own, and then you're there for the ride as whatever type of artist you are. You know what I mean? Even if you don't consider yourself an artist. But I like the way you set up things about the mechanics and because there's art to everything.
That's
I think
true.
life
Creation,
life itself is art. So I like that introduction and explanation, because it's really like that. You can see a really good mechanic, or the lady who does my hair. She's an artist.
Yeah.
Art, life is art itself, in a sense.
And so you bring it to the people. Why is that? So I'll go back to that question. Why is that part of your mission? You're very concerned with social justice issues and the figures that you work with. Paul Robeson, I know you've worked with James Baldwin, his work. Why is that important to you? Why not, some other figure?
Well, can I
Sure.
again amplify the question?
Yes, please.
Because I'm listening attentively to what you're saying, and you mentioned, Grant, that you did scenario-based training for NYPD. So maybe you could just explain what that was, because then combined with the kind of performance that Lindsey does, which is teaching in a classroom, or writing books or giving talks regarding social justice and history issues and things like that, it seems like there was the potential for a fit there, but it's definitely a mashup. You've got
There's a synergy.
Yeah, and that's a great question and actually explanation, because let's be honest, life is a mashup. Life is a straight mashup. Normally you wouldn't see, like you guys and like us guys, performing artists and the very smart academic together, you know what I mean? Especially together, not only maybe having synergy at home, but having synergy at work and stuff like that.
The scenario-based training.
Yeah, I got that.
just a little reminder.
See how that is? That's why you need, But anyway, so
He's an air sign.
yeah, but that's how the artist goes. I know the question. I got the question. So with scenario-based training, which is very funny, I had a friend who was an actor as well, got us into it. And it's basic scenario-based training with NYPD is portraying mentally ill people in different situations, so cops learn how to respond, not hurt them, and not get hurt. And NYPD is the largest, police force in the country. And it's ironic because my mother was mentally ill, so I was a child of a mentally ill parent, and I got into that, and I was really, really good at it because I seen all the, once you become a child of a mentally ill person, you learn to really watch for body cues and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then and so I was into that like that, and then towards the tail end of that is when Lindsey and I got together. And then that's how we transferred it over to the schools. So you really, with the scenario-based training, you get to train people, whatever their profession is, as far as like real time with real let's say professional actors. And then Lindsey pushing me into saying, hey, you can do this, and we could, hang our shingle for our own company.
In the schools, it's like difficult conversations that people need to practice with, interacting with parents, interacting with colleagues, interacting over, many different kinds of like diversity issues and such. And so they get practice with these situations with the actors before they have to do them. And then in real life, quote unquote, real life.
Yeah, portraying like, parents got to come in and hear that the student's not doing well academically, or they might be held back. And then, of course, the parents come hot and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. One
of the other things he does is for the hiring process as well, bringing in actors. So if you have a job candidate and you want to see how they perform in a situation, you put them into that situation with the actor, and then you can kind of assess their skills at whatever, you need them to do.
This is really great because, as we know, these conversations are typically not had. We just avoid them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And they're and they're going to happen anyway. That's the whole thing. These conversations are going to happen, whether you practice them or not. So being able to, practice a conversation or all the aspects that could happen it gives that person who has to have that conversation some sort of footing, because most people, as we know, public speaking or having to speak at all outside of when you want to talk is most challenging, but not for us, as you can see, not for me.
But I think it's all about growth, and maybe that's really what the arts are about. I think at the core, because what we want to help people do is to grow by learning, and then, like in the scenario-based training, grow by having confidence in these difficult situations and conversations. And I think that the arts is a way to really foster, human growth and development, and doing that in ways that are also, like fun, like with comedy, right? So you still kind of have that human dimension of the interaction, but you're also growing through the process as well.
Yeah, that's something that I don't know much about, humor. So,
well, actually, I'm usually the butt of Kim's jokes. So, yeah. No. But I just want to intervene here a moment, because we're in already such rich territory, right? So, just what you've been describing to us is just fascinating to me, because, well, at least for Kim and I, we are also into growth and development practices, right? These kinds of things that we practice, right? We're teachers, educators, and the way I like to think about that is that there are efforts towards consciousness raising. So raising the consciousness of our students. But in your case, there is clearly, from Lindsey's side, this classroom experience. Coop's side, it's more like the general public, or maybe even the institutional public, the NYPD. And not only that, thank you for your volunteering the information about mental health, Coop, because I also had some personal experience with mental health. My sister had mental health issues, and Kim works on a mental health committee for the college she works at. So this kind of engagement with the community, which is not only involved in public law enforcement or social regulation, I like to think of it like that. I mean, police forces are not just about arresting people, but it's for, keeping the peace and, intervening in domestic or mental health problems, right? That kind of stuff too. We forget that, the police is not just about carrying a gun and doing military activity. There's a social dimension to it that's super important.
A huge social element to it. Most of the things that they do aren't arresting people. That's the funny thing about it. It's really about our relationships. You know what I mean? So you're spot on with that. But you won't know that till you get to know some of the law enforcement without being on the good side or the bad side while you're talking to them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's a very, very, very astute, spot on perception. It's true.
I wanted to comment on going back to avoiding the conversations. So like and also talking about humor, which I lack. But because, our show is, I think part of what we're doing here is similar, talking about this quote unquote difficult topics, democracy and politics, which most of us avoid these conversations and bringing up these issues. And so this is one way for us to talk about them. And because we believe that it is through dialogue that we learn and understand and grow. So as opposed to just screaming at each other and telling other people you're wrong and I'm right, because we are all members of this community, and part of your work is working with everyone. You're not exclusively working with a group of people. You're trying to work with everyone, and you're bridging through art and humor. And humor is so wonderful because it disarms people, right? Because we're all laughing at our own human foibles. And philosophy is not like that. Philosophy can get us in trouble. We've been known to be, the father of philosophy was, got himself killed, and by being
stirring the pot.
By stirring the pot, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we don't make people laugh. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe they still laugh at us, right? But we don't have that escape valve, right?
Well, court jesters, that was a tough crowd. If you didn't make people laugh, that was your last show. So, I mean, and being first at anything is a gamble. You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? The first person that probably, made fun of a king or a queen, probably didn't have a long career. So but the first thing about humor is not taking oneself seriously, because you don't have all the answers,
right?
And as soon as you think you're funny, you'll find out. Find out. There's nothing like being up there when you're not getting laughs and you're supposed to. So that's what makes stand-up hard.
I'll say really quick, we also had a show that we did about comedy and like the history of African American comedy that we took into libraries. And like one of the hardest part for me for that show was like I opened that show and I tried to be funny. Really crashed and burned. And then he would do a whole set, of comedy, and then we would come back together and talk about some issues and things. But that was hard. That was like one of the hardest things I've ever done in front of people.
But when she tries not to be funny and just, you know what I mean, especially when you're self-deprecating. I mean, the biggest laughs I got was because I used to always have a big fro out or whatever. And I know that's the first thing people see, and I know people are thinking it, you know what I mean? So, I start from there first, because people want to relax. That's the thing about humor, is people want to be able to relax. But your first question is, I want to get back to that. See how that is? That first question about why is it important, if you want to frame it again, about doing our work to the communities and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure.
That's a great question. And this is where Doc's genius comes in, at when we went to the New York Humanities, and then we went to the New Jersey Humanities, and then we end up taking, I'll let you tell that, when we did that library circuit and stuff like that, because that was taking things to the community.
Yeah, we had a lot of interesting experiences. We did the James Baldwin discussion and the comedy history and discussion and performance in a lot of different public spaces. And you never know. These were free, so anybody could show up. And we had some people who came in who seemed to be mentally ill. We had people who came in who were like very resistant to what we were talking about. But we also would see people paying attention to what we were saying, and you could see the ideas kind of impacting them. And like one man who was like, angry and arms crossed and really, just resistant, he just like gradually like unfolded and ended up, like shaking my hand at the end. And, you can see how, just like you said, the conversation, the dialogue, making people laugh a little bit, but that it does have an impact on people. It really does.
So the great thing about, and I like that question, Kim and Jules, that you asked, why is it important to take, I'm paraphrasing the question, like the art and discussions and the like to the communities like that. So when we would, especially with the James Baldwin, discussions, because they would be open discussions, a lot of people had never heard about James Baldwin, but they were just interested. Some people knew people who met James Baldwin. So we went all over the place. And I think the important thing about taking art and that type of presentations or discussions to those communities, because those communities don't have a lot of times to think about these things, because as you know, we all have our different experiences. But when you're striving for, let's say, the daily things you need to survive day in and day out, which I have,
Right.
you don't get to look at life as a let's say a not a passenger, but as someone watching life go by, because you're always in motion. And so when the great thing about taking those things to, especially with the libraries, was we knew these places weren't having these type of presentations that we were doing. One, because Lindsey had just created them, but it gave them not only something and the way Lindsey makes what makes her a great educator is that she's not preaching. She just wants to give you some information and to have you think about it. Let us hear your voice, what your thoughts are. And a lot of these places just didn't have, one, people would bring stuff to them like this, and two, to allow them to have a let's say a voice in it. And that's why I think those things are really, really important. And you meet the most interesting people there, especially when you're not, because we didn't come with our personal views. I didn't have James Baldwin when I was coming up. I didn't know about Paul Robeson, and like you, I'm from New Jersey. I didn't know these things. And so to have these things, it energizes you. You see where we all can connect. You can see, you allow everyone's experience of life to be a little bit on display, and then those conversations are some of the best things that I remember about that. Going to these communities, it was really rewarding, and that's why that was a great question.
I'm just thrilled that we're having this conversation, this dialogue. Because some of the ideas you brought up, Cooper, have to do with the way I think about art and public art, especially performance art. Art that's brought to the people, as Kim put it, right? Why do you take art to the people? But so there's a lot of ideas that you touched upon that I work with in the way that I teach aesthetics and art, and the way I practice too as well, because I also have done my own kind of art activities. I designed a house at one point.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and the way that you were talking about the importance of the kind of activity that you're doing is you bring it to a public venue, and the public venue allows people who are just in their daily activities to take time out and to get engaged in this performance, which is out of the ordinary, and it gives them the opportunity to think about the issues that you bring to the venue, right? And we're just busy making our life, doing our life, trying to survive, keep a roof over our heads and food in our bellies, and repair the fence around our yard or whatever, these kinds of things. And we don't have time to think about this kind of stuff. And these are important issues, because if we don't take the time to think about it, right, then we harden ourselves in our biases and our prejudices.
Right.
And here you provide this venue, not only that's entertaining and allows people to relax a little and open up, because you're performing, right? It's a performance, right? And so then that becomes the opportunity to let one's guard down. And it seems to me, I haven't seen any of your performances, so I don't know, but the way you describe it, there seems to be a time where you also, after the performance, allow for kind of dialogue and question and answer. Then you get to the kind of political stuff we're talking about, right? The political social issues, where now people, after the performance, you know, they're relaxed a little bit, you know, you're not dangerous enemies, you know, you even have a sense of humor, right? And you can make them laugh or present interesting stuff, and then people get to engage, right? And this, you know, people with hard issues, like who resist talking about these kinds of things, have an opportunity to see, hey, these are just people talking about these issues that are important and talking about them in ways that make me think and allow me to reflect on my views or my position or the history of this, right, and why it's important. Anyway, I just want to say it's a fascinating way that you're practicing artists that bring important political discussions that are difficult and sensitive to the general public, right?
I would like to add something. For me, you're not just doing that, you're also healing people and healing communities, because of, you know, as humans, we hurt each other with our comments and more than that, our actions. And so if somebody does me wrong, most of us tend to, you know, shut that person away from our lives. And then more than that, we generalize and say, well, you know, people like that are like this, right? So then what you do creates a space where people can reflect and see the humanity in everybody, it seems to me, right? And so then, for me, that's repairing the democratic fiber, because I think part of our problem these days, or maybe forever, has been that we live in the same country, but here I go as a philosopher, right? Getting all serious. The sense of humor is gone, right?
No, it's all connected.
Yeah, you know, so then it's like my group against your group, and let's see who wins. And there's no really working together. It's more, I'm going to try to work to keep you out and have more of a majority so that your people can. And so there's really no community. And if there's no community, to me, how is that a democracy? How is that? I'm just really working for my group instead of try to learn from everybody and work with everybody's talents. I don't know if you want to say something. I interrupted you, Coop, and go ahead.
No, that's how, yeah, but it's a discussion. I mean, that's a great thing about, you know, because Doc told me, you know, the work you do with the, you know, the incarcerated and stuff like that. I mean, and the way I believe you two ladies take what you've worked very hard to achieve as far as academics and stuff like that. A lot of academics don't really take those type of paths. You know what I mean? So that's where the art of what you guys do, or the way you want to, the footsteps that you take, the path that you choose to go, because as soon as you think there's a group and you're part of a group, you know what I mean? You know, you really do shut yourself out. And like you said, when you get mad at someone, I do that too. You know, just distance myself from that person or things. But if we think in groups, the biggest group is all of us. You know what I mean? And I know that sounds like philosophy the way I'm saying it, but I'm not a philosopher. But I talk like that because I kind of think like that. You know, but what makes it good about these pairings that we have, when you have the highly educated, because then the highly educated, you know, we can bring back what history connects all these things, you know. And so whereas a lot of people, and going back to the communities, don't have time to go to higher education, all these other things, so it'd be a little bit harder for them first for the academic to come in and say something, and sometimes even for my type of comedy to come in to say something, you know, to get their guard down or whatever. But when you have this great mixture that one is not trying to fight the other, and one doesn't have all the knowing, it can turn out to be some beautiful things, because the only group is the human group, and it is frustrating to see that we talk at each other at best, a lot of times. No one will put these pairings together or put your pairing together if we look at it like that, with the groups, educators, performing artists, and stuff like that. So I believe we're lucky where we are, you know what I mean? And because we certainly didn't make a lot of money. We didn't make money going to the libraries, you know what I mean? But it was some of the most rewarding work ever. And it's because she thought outside the box, you know what I mean? And then everything else just went from there, you know what I mean? Everything else, because you can see I'm all up here and stuff, but you do need someone to say, oh, well, we're going to have this outline or whatever. But then even within that outline, like life, we're also going to accept and allow whatever happens to happen.
One of the things that Paul Robeson used to always say and remind his audiences about was what we have in common, as people. We all want to be able to, love our families and have safety and shelter for our families, and, have a life with, a sense of purpose and meaning. Those kinds of really fundamental ideas we really all have in common. And we need reminders of that, though, especially at a time when things feel so polarized, politically. We are people, and we all have, fundamental commonalities because of that. And that's one of the things I really loved about Robeson, was that, he was a polarizing figure, and, people put him in this, area, like he was this crazy radical, and really all he really mostly talked about was trying to get people together and, reminding people of what we all have in common, and I think that's one of the great barriers that art can help break down. Let's see ourselves as human beings and feel the connection that can bring.
That's great. And one of the ways that happens, and this is the kind of particular way that you practice your art, right? Your art form, this particular performance art form, right? Which really fits with what Kim and I are doing here as well with our show, right? And what we're attempting to do is to get people not only to give them a break from their daily the daily grind of their activities, or the kind of tension-filled conflicts that they're involved in, right? But to highlight the importance of listening and understanding and talking, right? And carrying on a dialogue, right? So you act out or create a scenario that's dialogue-based, right? You get this conversation going, that's dialogue-based, right? And then from that performance, if I'm understanding this correctly, then that provides the opportunity to get a dialogue going between you as educators, the both of you as performance educators or social justice educators, right? With the community and the audience that comes to listen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge public service. I mean, our government should pay you more money.
Yeah.
You're doing a good service. You're breaking down these tensions that are driving us into polar oppositions, right?
Oh gosh, yeah.
The thing is, it's so beautiful, and that's why I know I'm lucky, because even before we did this today, I'm walking around moping, moping around, and Doc is like trying to, hey, what's going on? And I'm like playing there's nothing going on, that whole thing. Okay, well, you let me know when you want to talk. There's nothing to talk about, right? And it's let's say, because what we learned, and Doc's a great articulator, because the thing about going to those libraries was what we figured out, mainly Doc immediately figured out as first few, let's say, presentations, was to allow people to have a little platform to speak. You know what I mean? Now, of course, like you said, there was some mentally ill in there.
It was exciting.
So they'll go on forever, but you have to kind of, corral that.
Yeah.
But the thing is everyone has some sort of pain, hurt, or if you want to say, everyone has their cross or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to get past your pain to see that you're not the only one.
Right.
You know what I mean? Here. And that's one of the things that's a huge barrier as far as talking, because everyone has, well, this is what happened to me. And not to negate that, we understand that. Mm-hmm. But trust me, things have happened to everyone. And so to be able to do this stuff, you know what I mean? You're right. It is a service, but it's a great service. And I'm always amazed because we never set out to do this. I know I never set out to do this. You know what I mean? But it's really rewarding, and seeing those people when you go out into the community, when they come up to you, like you say, Jules, after the presentation is over, is when you really get to the meat and potatoes of things, and when people are really, really expressing themselves and all. You wish you had another few hours just for that. That's what makes it worth it, And then it's with the James Baldwin thing, we would have people say, okay, well, what can I do? Like, as far as helping the cause, and there was no cause. Like, what can I do to add, to the wheel of life? And I would say you do whatever you can, where you are,
whatever your skills are,
whatever you can, you know what I mean? But just the fact that you want to say that and feel that, you know what I mean? There's no amount of money they can pay us to elicit that, from someone. But that's been very, very rewarding. And when you hit people like that, it's we don't know, we don't have any follow-ups to know what happens after that. But you do know, and then we all know that. That as educators with students, we know that as performing artists, we know that as a crossbreed. When you hit people, you know what I mean? And that's the greatest thing that one can achieve, especially when you didn't set out to do that, and some of the things that she's taught me through education, I'm so like, oh, I wish I had this when I was early. As you can see, I can devour stuff for me to have been, because I was too angry at that point in life. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have been receiving that. There would have been a time I wouldn't have received anything, even though I know, but I wouldn't receive because I'm still worried about how how the country's affected me,
right?
And all this other stuff. I'm glad we're doing this today, because it is a great, great service.
I would like to ask you.
We're both as philosophers. We're both wanting to jump in now and comment, right?
Right. Why do you do, right? Yeah. So people ask you.
By the way, Coop did touch on beauty already.
Oh yeah. Now that you think about beauty, now I can answer those questions.
I would like to put it out there, and then of course Jules will modify the question, but that's fine. My question is, how people would ask you, what can I do? I would like to ask you, why do you do this work?
Oh no, that was along the lines of what I was getting at to, because one of the things that you mentioned early on in our dialogue today was about art as a creative activity, right? And so the question, why did you do, or why do you do what you do, or how did you get into doing it, also touches upon this issue of art as creative, right? And the other thing, Coop, you said just in passing, you say a lot of things in passing, right? Which is great. I mean, you're packed full of these insights and ideas, right? Was that you get, then the way you do what you do with your kinds of performance art that builds into this performance the opportunity for dialogue, is you get people to then create as well. You open up the avenues or the possibility to create, right? So now to come back to Kim's question, which was a little more personal, how did you get? Why did you get involved in this kind of activity?
I'll go first real quick. For me, the creative force, I mean, I think of it as spiritual, because I don't know where it comes from. It's just a compulsion that you have in here. And there's no choice about it. It's not like I set out one day, I'm going to be a creative, and I'm going to go around, right. It just, you just had to do it. It was just what you did. It was like, some people might call it channeling, if you believe in that sort of thing, or just like, for coming from the spirit, whatever you believe in. But to me, the creative force is, it's part of what connects us spiritually. And when you have that creative compulsion, you sort of have to act on it. And I think if you repress that, then that's when you run into problems, right? But if you can find spaces to help that to flourish or to express that, that's kind of it's part of the act of, human creation, right? And I think we're all creators on some level. I think some of us are just maybe a little bit more intuitive and tapped into the creative process, but I think it's there for everybody. And, you want to talk about how you came to the arts?
Okay.
This is a great story.
So yeah, as you can see, I'm the storm. So I basically,
the Apollonian and the Dionysian. That was a Nietzsche reference. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You'll break it down for me later, but you're probably spot on. So I was working in Atlantic City. I was a crap stealer with the dice and stuff, and this is back when Atlantic City the casinos were still doing very well.
In the 80s.
In the 80s, yeah. Because I started in '89. So one of my coworkers kept saying, Lisa Jo from Georgia. Lisa Jo kept saying, you should do comedy. You should do comedy. You're very funny. And I would brush her off because everyone's funny, where I grew up. When you really, really struggling, poor, whatever, you have two things to sharpen is your fighting skills and your verbal skills, right? So everyone's funny because if you're not laughing, then you're crying, right? But she kept at me saying, you should really do comedy. And the thing about the casinos is when we didn't have any action, you would sit there with your arms folded, but there was always music on. And I respond to music very well because I believe the most universal language is music and then humor. That's what I believe. Those two connect everything, right? They say the first thing we hear even before we're born is mom's heartbeat, right? So she kept at me and I would be like, nah. But then I started watching myself be myself. And then I noticed that I was making people laugh, but I wasn't trying to be like the class clown. But then I noticed I was making those mob guys, the mobsters, laugh when they were losing their money. I was skirt on the edge. And then I finally got up and went to try an open mic, a stand-up. And I did the stand-up that night, And the only time in my life was that, they say your feet weren't touching the ground. And for that 24 hours, that next day, my feet didn't touch the ground because it was something that I didn't knew I had that I discovered because of Lisa Jo. But even then, I still didn't pursue it because it wasn't like something I was connected to until I wanted to get out of Atlantic City. Once Atlantic City stopped being fun. And then I started to pursue the arts, but I had no plan, especially about making money. I just wanted to be good. And you can be good and be broke. You know what I mean? We all know that. You can do great work. You know what I mean?
Many people like that in New York City.
Right, yeah. Mother Teresa type work. And you're starving too. It's true, right?
Yes.
But to end up where we are now, I consider it the universe heard that I wanted to be good. I wanted to do something more than just make people laugh. You know what I mean? Because not to negate, negate that, because it is a skill to make anybody laugh. But I wanted to do work that would be here long after I'm gone. That's the challenge for me. Mm-hmm. But I never knew it would be something like having this interview with you guys. Like I never pictured this. So when you let the universe take over the wheel, You know what I mean? You'll end up at some really spectacular spots. Unexpected spots, you know what I mean? And hanging around with very smart people, you know what I mean? Because I think like this, you know what I mean? As you can see, I get very passionate about it. If you just saw me before we turned the camera on, you'd have been like, oh man, this is not going to be good. But we feel very, very lucky. Like the last time we did something with you, Kim, and stuff like, I feel lucky to do those. Those things are they seem, well, they're small because, you know, very few people know about them, but they will age well. You know what I mean? They will age well. And, you know, like now I'm going to walk away from here very energized again, you know. But when you see people, when you touch people in a way that we're touched with the work we do, that's probably even more special to me, to see that in someone else's eye, for someone to say, hey, what can I do? Or, you know what I mean? Because they say the greatest leader creates other leaders. That's the best thing you can do, not try to be a dictator. We don't want to, I don't have all the answers, you know what I mean? I still have questions, but I feel very fortunate, you know what I mean, to be doing these type of things, you know what I mean? Because they will age well, and they're the truest thing that we have, you know, but it's all, you know, I give her the credit because you would think the academic would be the one who would not take these chances. But she has a different type of ticker inside of her, just like Kim does, going to helping the incarcerated. I've done one of the biggest thrills I had was doing Sloan Kettering hospitals, like, you know, hospitals where people have cancer for free. Doing comedy there, you know, and the crowd would be from, you know, like 8 to 80. You know what I mean? Now that's a tough crowd, right? Plus everyone there has cancer. But just to touch those people and those people to say thank you for, you know, doing what you do or how you did it.
Yeah, it was really meaningful. We brought you on. This is not our first collaboration with EPCC. We brought you on right at the aftermath of the police brutality that happened with George Floyd. So that was a very tense moment, you know, recently in our recent history. You know, many people were, rightly so, very angry.
The anger's still there, but this particular encounter is a little more reflective.
Yeah, the anger's there, and the art that you have, Kim. You know what I mean? We're talking about art. Yeah, you don't need humor. You don't have to be funny for what you do. What you do, especially like to go and to, let's say, donate your time and heart with, like, say, the incarcerated and stuff like that, takes a really different set of skills. You know what I mean? It takes being able to connect with humans at, let's say, I don't even want to say their worst, like their most vulnerable. You know what I mean? And those are things, obviously, I feel as though we four here, obviously we're here because we're on the same channel, at least today, are very, very, very fortunate and lucky. You know what I mean? Because when you really look at it, we are practicing some type of art that you wouldn't be able to say, oh, this falls under this category. It falls under the art of life. You know what I mean? Some of it is luck. You know what I mean? And then I don't know what the rest of it is, but I think a lot of it is luck. Because she tells me all the time the things you're doing, that what you do with your higher education. She tells me what you do, Jules. And even before we had these conversations, those things I live off of. You know, I'm a great cheerleader. You know what I mean? Because those things connect with me.
I just feel also very fortunate to know you. We're fighting the good fight, you know, is how I feel. We're all fighting the good fight and trying to create bridges across the borders and for people to talk to each other, be able to laugh at ourselves and create a community instead of more division, where, you know, our communities are so deeply wounded. And but I don't know, I still feel like this is you know, like this is where I'm from. I'm getting all emotional. And I just want to continue, I just want to continue to have fun, laugh at ourselves,
Yeah, and
laugh at Jules.
laugh at me, right? But I think this has been a really special dialogue that we've had with you, and we do have to draw to a close. I'm really impressed by your reference to your floating on air experience, Coop. The day after, because that's actually part of it. I mean, we get mired down in our hurt
so
and our anger. We get heavy, right? And we need these experiences where we lift up. We lift up the possibility by conversing with each other, having a dialogue, by laughing, by having time to just think and breathe. Right?
Yeah.
These are such important experiences.
It's life affirming.
Yeah, life affirming.
Right. That's what the arts bring us. They affirm all of that and they lift us up. Yeah. And that's why we need the arts, right? To survive.
We need the understanding that arts isn't just as what is defined to us, you know what I mean? Because I'm going to go back to how you started, which is, about the mechanic and stuff like that. Because a lot of people don't see art or the possibility of art in these art jobs. And there's no such thing, I really believe. It's just whether or not you're unfortunately or fortunate enough to be connected to it. Probably that floating that next day when I did my stand-up is probably that feeling that we probably connect to if we believe that, our spirit goes somewhere else. And, because it definitely was, my feet were touching the ground, but they weren't touching the ground. And you know what I mean? So there you go. I must have connected into something. I wish I could have sustained it, but, yeah, I mean, and we are very fortunate to have these conversations. I mean, because you down in Texas, man, how many people are like you guys down there?
No, we're a pair of one of a kind.
I think, especially here, because we're on the U.S.-Mexico border, there's more of us than not. Because we have the U.S. and Mexico, and here we are, and we're not really the way that media portrays us. Media, the news, it's always like it's a war, and that's just not how it is here.
There's exchange,
Right?
Yeah, that's what stood out. First time I visited, I was like, wow, it's like everybody is just interacting, like across the so-called line,
Right. And so part of our effort is to bring this this unity in spite of the borders, to whoever is watching us. So on that note, we want to thank our viewers, our crew, Dr. Lindsey, Coop, Jules, and Kim, and please join us next time.
Thank you very much.